Hong Kong just spent $18 billion on a project that should have been impossible. They built a massive piece of land in the middle of the ocean that is 650 hectares. It is basically like building a brand new airport right next to the old one while planes are still taking off every single minute. But here is the part that will shock you. Underneath this new land sits a giant pile of toxic mud that has been there for decades. If the engineers made one wrong move, they could have poisoned the entire ocean and killed everything in the water. How do you build a 3,800-meter runway on top of toxic sludge without touching the mud? To understand why they did this, we have to look back at how this airport started. Before 1998, Hong Kong had one of the scariest airports in the world. It was called Kai Tak, and planes had to fly right between tall apartment buildings to land. To fix that, the city built a massive artificial island at a place called Chek Lap Kok. They flattened two whole islands and filled in the sea to create a giant platform. For a long time, this was enough, but Hong Kong is the heart of Asia. It is only 5 hours away from half of the people on the entire planet. By 2018, the two runways they had were completely full. They were handling nearly 70 million passengers every year. The system could only handle 68 flights every hour, and it was at its breaking point. If they didn't grow, they would lose their spot as the world's best place for travel and trade. So they came up with Master Plan 2030. They decided to add a third runway, a new terminal, and a whole world of robot technology. But there was no land left on the island. The only way to grow was to go back into the sea. But how do you build a runway on top of a giant pile of toxic sludge without making everyone sick? The biggest problem the engineers faced was the mud. About 40% of the new land sits on top of what they call contaminated mud pits. These are giant holes in the ocean floor where people used to dump waste. If you tried to dig that mud up to build a solid foundation, you would release heavy metals and poison into the water. This would be a disaster for the Chinese white dolphins that live there. So the engineers used a clever trick called deep cement mixing, or DCM. Instead of digging the mud up, they decided to turn it into rock while it was still underwater. They brought in 62 massive ships called rigs. These rigs have giant spinning drills that go deep into the ocean floor. First, they laid a 2-meter thick layer of sand over the seabed. Then, the drills went through the sand and into the toxic mud. As the drills spun, they pumped in a mixture of cement and water called slurry. It is like a giant kitchen mixer, but instead of cake batter, it is mixing cement into the mud. This created tens of thousands of solid cement columns that reach as deep as 50 meters down. These columns are between 0.6 and 2.4 meters wide. Once the cement hardened, the mud became as strong as a building foundation. This non-dredge method meant they didn't have to move a single spoonful of toxic waste. It kept the poison locked away and gave the new runway a solid base that won't sink into the sea. But mixing the mud was just the beginning. There was a massive problem buried under the seabed that could shut the whole airport down if it broke. Right where the new land was supposed to go, there were two huge aviation fuel pipelines. These pipes are the lifeblood of the airport. They carry all the fuel needed for the thousands of planes that fly in and out. If these pipes were damaged or blocked, the entire airport would stop working in hours. The engineers couldn't just build over them because the weight of the new land would crush them. They had to move the pipes, but they had to do it without disturbing the ocean floor. Their solution was a world record-breaking engineering feat. They used a method called horizontal directional drilling. Think of it like a giant, steerable underground straw. They started on the mainland and drilled a hole that went deep into the solid rock, 100 meters below the seabed. They didn't just drill a straight line. They steered the drill bit with incredible precision for a distance of 5,100 meters. That is more than 5 kilometers long. It was the longest drill of its kind ever done in the history of the world at that time. Once the hole was finished, they pulled two new 50-centimeter steel pipes all the way through. This moved the fuel supply safely into the deep rock, far away from the new construction and protected from anything happening on the surface. Now that the land and the fuel were safe, the engineers had to build giant tunnels under a train that never stops moving. The new expansion includes a massive tunnel that is 1.8 kilometers long. Inside this tunnel are 8 different cells. Some are for a high-speed baggage system, and others are for an automated people mover, which is a driverless train that carries passengers. But there was a huge obstacle in the way: the Airport Express Railway. This is the high-speed train that connects the airport to the city. It carries thousands of people every hour, and the airport authority said it could not be stopped for even one day. To get the tunnels under the tracks, the engineers used a technique called box jacking. Instead of digging a hole and building a tunnel, they built the tunnel first. They cast two massive concrete boxes on the side of the tracks. Each box was 30 meters long and weighed 5,100 tons. To give you an idea of how heavy that is, it is the same as 27 Boeing 747 jumbo jets. To move these giant blocks, they used powerful hydraulic jacks. These are like the tools you use to lift a car, but much bigger. They pushed the concrete boxes through the soil at a rate of only a few centimeters at a time. To make sure the train tracks didn't collapse, they first drilled a canopy of steel pipes over the area to hold up the ground. They also used a special anti-drag system to make sure the boxes didn't pull the dirt along with them and cause the tracks to sink. They successfully pushed these massive boxes into place without the trains above ever having to slow down. Now the tunnels were in place, but above ground they were building a roof so complex that a normal human brain couldn't design it. The new Terminal 2 is a giant building designed to handle 50 million passengers every year. The most beautiful part of the building is its waveform roof. It looks like a series of waves made of steel and glass. This roof is made of 11,750 tons of steel. It has 16 primary trusses, and each one is 223 meters long. The shape of the roof is so complicated that every single connection had to be designed using a special computer system called Tekla BIM. In most buildings, you design the parts and then build them. But here, the connections were so weird that the engineers had to build a digital model first just to see if the parts would even fit together. There was another problem: height limits. Because the airport is active, you cannot use tall cranes that might get in the way of planes. So the engineers used heavy lifting. They built the massive roof segments on the ground and then used jacking towers to slowly pull them up into the air. They used 200 tons of high-tensile steel bars to hold everything together as it was lifted. It is like building a giant puzzle on the floor and then lifting the whole thing into the sky at once. But once the building is done, how do you make sure the millions of bags and people actually get where they need to go? The new baggage system is a marvel of engineering called an individual carrier system, or ICS. In old airports, bags are thrown onto a long belt where they can slide around or get stuck. In the new Hong Kong system, every single bag gets its own little plastic tub or tote. These tubs act like little race cars on a track. They travel at speeds between 25 and 36 kilometers per hour. Because every bag is in its own tub, the computer knows exactly where every single piece of luggage is at every second. This system can handle 9,600 bags every single hour. It is so fast that it aims to get the first bag to the luggage belt within 20 minutes of a plane landing. For the passengers, there is a new automated people mover train. This driverless train travels through the tunnels we talked about at 80 kilometers per hour. It can carry 10,800 people every hour, making sure that connecting between terminals only takes about 2.5 minutes. Even the way planes land has changed. They installed 6 new instrument landing systems with 32-element localizer arrays. These use invisible radio waves to guide planes down to the runway with incredible accuracy, even in thick fog or heavy rain. With all 3 runways working together, the airport can now handle 102 flight movements every hour. That means a plane is taking off or landing nearly every 35 seconds. Building this project was not just about concrete and steel. It was a massive financial and environmental mission. The total cost was 141.5 billion Hong Kong dollars. To pay for it, the airport didn't just use taxes. They used a joint contribution model. This includes a fee on every plane ticket you buy, ranging from $70 to $180, depending on how far you are flying. Environmentally, the project faced a lot of criticism. Local groups were worried about the Chinese white dolphins. To help, the engineers designed eco-friendly seawalls. Instead of smooth concrete, they used over 500 special bioblocks. These blocks have rough surfaces, holes, and even little pools that stay filled with water when the tide goes out. This gives small sea creatures, like crabs and mussels, a place to hide and grow. They also created a giant marine park that is 2,400 hectares big to protect the dolphins' home. The project hit a major milestone on November 28, 2024, when all 3 runways officially started working together. But the work isn't finished yet. The new passenger facilities in Terminal 2 are scheduled to open on May 27, 26. When that happens, the airport will be able to handle 120 million passengers every year. Hong Kong's third runway is more than just a strip of land. It is a monument to what happens when you combine world record drilling, underwater cement mixing, and robot logistics to conquer the sea. If you found this engineering story as incredible as we did, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. If you want to see more deep dives into the world's most massive construction projects, subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss a video. What do you think is the most impressive part of this airport? The world record drill or the moving concrete boxes? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.